All this movie was missing was Eddie Van Halen at a Circle K. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2020 sci-fi comedy sequel, Bill and Ted Face the Music. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, ranked lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some trailer film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Bill and Ted Face the Music stars Alex Winter, Keanu Reeves, and Kristin Schaal, and was directed by Parisot. It tells the story of Bill and Ted, played by Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves, as they strive to write a song that will save all of reality. It's been 29 years since we last saw our duo of time-traveling rockers. In their youth, they went on both an excellent adventure and a bogus journey, but now that they're middle-aged, it's time for Bill and Ted to face the music. Or is it? The first two Bill and Ted films were incredibly strange. Excellent Adventure was a goofy, wholesomely fun time travel movie that still stands apart from its conspecifics. And Bogus Journey? Well, that was a wild and totally random ride to hell and back that shouldn't have worked at all, but somehow has left nearly as indelible a mark on sci-fi comedy as the first film. They were movies that stood as outlier pillars of their era, and now, nearly 3 decades later, we've got a third installment. I gotta admit that I was very surprised when this film was announced. This certainly wasn't a franchise that called for a third movie, and it honestly just seemed weird to be doing another one after so long, especially since the films have kind of fallen into semi-obscurity. But I was intrigued. Not necessarily excited initially, but intrigued. And I have to admit that the first trailer definitely upped my interest level. And after rewatching the first two films for the first time in who knows how long, I was actually mildly excited for this. But despite that excitement, I was still very hesitant. These movies were so of their time period, and I just wasn't sure if Bill and Ted could work in 2020. Well, I'm happy and surprised to say that they do. Somehow. Much like the other two films, Face the Music shouldn't work. It's dumb. It's random. It's nothing like any other movies coming out today, but it works. This movie's an encapsulation of and homage to its predecessors, but also a slightly new take on things that works surprisingly well as a story continuation. Like I said before, Bogus Journey didn't need a sequel. It was a ridiculous movie that wrapped up its story in a contained way, so Face the Music could have easily felt like an unnecessary cash grab trying to capitalize on the 30-year nostalgia cycle, but it doesn't feel like that at all. This movie has that similar wholesome, unabashedly fun feel to it that Excellent Adventure did. It embraces the absurdity of its plot so fervently and unironically that we do too. And that was one of the things that always surprised me about Excellent Adventure. It's so dumb and weird, but it's such a positive experience as a viewer that you can't help but enjoy it. And I'm so glad that this third film was able to capture that vibe again. It also does a good job of pulling in elements of Bogus Journey too. For me at least, that film was always a little bit less fun, but it was absolutely bonkers with its plot, somehow even more so than the first movie. And Face the Music has a similar wild quality to it, while managing to rein it in enough to have a plot that's still relatively easy to follow. Really, this whole film is just a big, fun homage to the first two movies. So that might make this an unusual experience for anybody who hasn't seen the originals, but for those who have, this is just a delight. There's always the danger with sequels of just rehashing what happened in the previous movie. Bogus Journey was the absolute antithesis of that, and while Face the Music isn't quite that different, I was happy to see it's not just a rehash either. It certainly draws a lot of inspiration from the first two movies, kidnapping historical figures from their time periods, multiple Bill and Teds, going to hell, but it's all done in the context of its own continuation of the story. The other aspect of this film that I was most hesitant about going in was Bill and Ted themselves. They're such a ridiculous and memorable pair, but I wasn't sure how their oblivious slacker dude personas would work here. As teenagers in 1989, it didn't seem that out of place, but as 50-something-year-olds in 2020, it could have been really rough. And there were some shaky moments with it, but for the most part, I was pleasantly surprised that it didn't get old. Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves do a remarkable job of falling back into the roles as genuinely believable friends. Plus, they each portray 4 other versions of themselves in this movie. In addition to Bill and Ted, Billy and Thea were a pleasant surprise as well. I was a bit concerned with their initial introduction, but I really grew to like them. And Brigette Lundy-Paine and Samara Weaving do an excellent job with the classic Bill and Ted mannerisms and speech patterns. Much like the other Bill and Ted films, this is a stupid movie, but that's part of its charm. It's got an absolutely ridiculous premise that gets more and more absurd as the movie goes on, but man is it fun. As with its predecessors, not all the jokes hit, and there are definitely a few gags that they spend too much time on, but I found it funny more often than not, which is a win in my book when it comes to absurd humor. There are so many things that resurface here. Missy, Station, 69. It was really nice to see all of the recurring humor coming back here too. And then there was just great new stuff. Billy and Thea's collection sequence was easily my favorite part of the movie. Kid Cudi's knowledge of theoretical physics was entertaining, and maybe it's just because it was 2 a.m. at the end of a long, emotionally taxing day, but I actually laughed out loud, which I never do, at Jesus rocking out on the cowbell. So, was this sequel necessary? No. But is it every bit as entertaining as the original films? Yeah. These movies have always been absurd. They've never made much sense, and they're goofy sci-fi comedies that never should have worked. But they're fun. They're breezy, ridiculous entertainment, and as long as you can just accept it and go with the flow, and not get bogged down trying to think about the intentionally numerous plot holes, these movies are just feel-good escapism. And so, a Bill and Ted movie in 2020 might have sounded odd, but it's exactly what we needed these days. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro has got to be the connections to the previous 2 films. And maybe some people will consider this a negative, but I love the fact that it references and pays homage to the first 2 movies. Plot points, characters, running gags. I don't know if it's just because I rewatched Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey so recently, but for me, it was really satisfying to see how much effort they put into this. And even though there are so many connections and similarities, the plot manages to remain its own distinct thing, rather than just being a rehash of what we've seen before in the franchise. Pro number 2 is Billy and Thea. I really didn't expect to like these characters as much as I did. They started off sorta eye-rollingly as slacker copycats of their fathers, so I thought the gimmick was gonna get old really fast. But I guess I should have known better, cause that's how I felt about Bill and Ted too at the beginning of Excellent Adventure the first time I watched it. But these 2 grew on me very quickly, much like their dads had all those years ago. They've got an interesting subplot and go on their own excellent adventure and bogus journeys during this movie. The whole musician collection sequence was by far my favorite part of this film, and I would have been happy with a whole movie about just that concept. On the con side, my biggest issue is the same as I had with Excellent Adventure. It's stupid, and that works for the most part, and gets pretty much enveloped by the general charm of the movie, but there are definitely some jokes that fall a bit flat, or certain gags and scenes that play out for a bit longer than they should have. That's expected in a goofy comedy like this, but the underlying stupidity of it all does shine through a bit more in those moments. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Bill and Ted Face the Music, or any of the films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Bill and Ted Face the Music 3 out of 5 paws. This was a really fun and most entertaining movie, and a great delayed follow-up to the original 2 films. It's a high 3 paw for me, and I wouldn't be surprised if it eventually climbed to 3.5 on rewatch. I would recommend Bill and Ted Face the Music to fans of Bill and Ted. If you already like the first two movies, you're definitely going to find plenty to like about this one too. There are a ton of references and nods to them, and the whole vibe's pretty similar. If you like absurd sci-fi comedies or time travel movies, you'll probably enjoy this story, but I definitely suggest watching Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey first. This movie's all over the place as it is. Without the base of knowledge from the other films, I can only imagine how crazy and confusing this would seem. If you liked Bill and Ted Face the Music, I would most obviously recommend Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's the first film of the franchise, so not only does it establish the characters of Bill and Ted, but also the ridiculous time-traveling scenario, as well as the goofy and fun tone. And second most obviously, I'd recommend Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. That movie is totally bizarre and incredibly ridiculous, but it's got its fun moments too. Plus, it establishes hell in the Bill and Ted world, not to mention the concept of alternate Bill and Teds, as well as the pivotal and hysterical character Death. And if you like the comedy and want another movie by director Dean Parisot, you've got to check out Galaxy Quest. It's an extremely funny comedy about actors on a Star Trek-like TV show who are mistaken for the real deal by an alien society who need their help. And it's just amazing. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, so I'll recommend it any chance I get. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Bill and Ted Face the Music? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie that prominently features a phone booth? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.